Lena Hayes was used to long, quiet nights. Her small apartment on the outskirts of the city had always been her refuge, a place where she could escape the noise and chaos of the world. At 28, she had built a modest but comfortable life for herself, working as a graphic designer for a small marketing firm. The work wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and more importantly, it allowed her the freedom to live simply. Her life, though quiet, was anything but perfect. Lena had never been the social type. Her friends were few, and she kept to herself most of the time, preferring the company of her thoughts and her work over the hustle and bustle of crowded social gatherings. She had always felt that she didn't quite fit in, and as a result, she'd become accustomed to solitude. On this particular evening, after a long day of work, Lena sat in her cozy living room, the only light coming from the soft glow of her desk lamp. Outside, the rain pounded against her window, a steady rhythm that usually brought her a sense of peace. But tonight, something was different. The usual calm of the rain was interrupted by an unexpected sound. High-pitched, urgent, almost like a cry. Lena frowned, her attention drifting away from her computer screen. She strained her ears, trying to pinpoint the source. There it was again, a small, desperate meow carried by the wind. It sounded like it was coming from outside, just beyond the window. Confused, she got up and walked to the window, pulling the curtain aside. In the dim light of the street lamp, she saw a tiny, soaked form huddled on the ground in the corner of her building's entrance. Kitten, shivering and crying out in the rain, its fur matted and wet. Lena's heart sank. She had always been an animal lover, and the sight of an animal in distress pulled at her heartstrings. She couldn't just ignore it. Without a second thought, she grabbed her jacket, rushed to the door, and stepped out into the storm. The cold, wet air hit her skin, but her focus was entirely on the tiny, trembling creature. The kitten's cries grew louder as she approached, its small body barely visible through the downpour. But as Lena crouched down to pick it up, something caught her eye, something that would change everything. But little did she know, this encounter would lead to a discovery that would forever alter her life. Lena cradled the kitten gently in her arms, its tiny body shaking with cold. She could feel the weight of the animal's distress, its heart beating rapidly against her palm as she hurried back toward her apartment door. Her first instinct was to rush inside, get it warm, and figure out what had happened to it. But as she turned to enter the building, she heard a voice from behind her. "Hey, you there, is that a kitten?" Lena stopped, glancing over her shoulder. A man stood by the entrance, his clothes drenched by the rain, but his eyes wide with concern. His expression was gentle, and despite the storm, there was something calm about him. He wore no coat, just a simple shirt and jeans, looking more like a passerby than someone who lived in the building. "Yes," Lena answered quickly, her voice tight with worry. "I found it outside. It's freezing. I don't know how long it's been there." The man approached slowly, his gaze focused on the kitten. His name was Marcus, she would later learn, and though he appeared a little older than her, in his early 30s, he had an easy warmth to him that immediately put Lena at ease. His eyes seemed to carry a deep kindness that made her feel like he wasn't just someone passing through the rain, but someone who had seen and experienced enough of life to understand what really mattered. "You're right to bring it in," Marcus said, his voice soft but firm. "It's not safe for something so small in this weather. You're doing the right thing." Lena glanced at him, surprised by the gentleness in his words. She hadn't expected to meet anyone out in the rain tonight, let alone someone who spoke with such certainty and care. She'd spent years getting used to doing things alone, and she wasn't used to people approaching her with kindness in a situation like this. "Are you a vet or something?" she asked, half joking to mask the awkwardness she felt in his presence. Marcus chuckled lightly. "No, nothing like that. I just know what it's like to take care of animals. My parents used to have a small animal rescue. I spent a lot of time helping out when I was younger." The revelation caught Lena off guard. Here was a man who worked with animals, had a deep knowledge of their needs, and yet there was no sense of ego or grandiosity about him. He wasn't wearing a uniform or talking about his experience like he was trying to impress anyone. He simply helped because it was what he knew how to do. "Well, I'm glad you came by," Lena said, feeling a little awkward but grateful. She looked at the kitten again. It had stopped crying, but it still felt frail in her arms. "I really don't know what to do next. I just found it like this. What do I do for it now?" Marcus smiled warmly, nodding in understanding. "First things first, we need to get it dry and warm. Do you have a towel or a blanket inside?" Lena nodded. "Yeah, I do. Let me get one." As she turned to unlock her apartment door, Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He began tapping the screen, making a call. "It's all good," he said, noticing Lena's glance. "I'm just calling my friend. She runs a local animal rescue. She can help with things like this." Lena raised an eyebrow, impressed. "You're calling in backup for a kitten?" "Well, why not?" Marcus said with a shrug, a smile playing on his lips. "Everyone needs backup sometimes." He didn't make a big deal out of it. He didn't rush or act like he knew everything. Instead, he focused on the task at hand, handling the situation with quiet efficiency. He followed Lena inside and made himself comfortable, not with the arrogance of someone trying to prove himself, but with the ease of someone used to helping, someone who didn't need recognition for doing the right thing. As she wrapped the kitten in the towel, Marcus gently coaxed it into a small, warm box she had prepared. "It's not just about saving the animal. It's about being gentle and patient with them," Marcus said as he worked with her, his voice soft and steady. He adjusted the kitten carefully and ensured it was comfortable. Animals, especially those that have been abandoned or hurt, need a calm presence. They need to trust that they're safe. Lena watched him, captivated by the tenderness with which he handled the kitten. His actions were so simple, so grounded, but there was something incredibly powerful about the way he interacted with the animal and with her. It was as if he had an understanding of the deeper needs in others, whether they were human or animal, and his quiet humility made Lena feel like everything was going to be okay. After a few more minutes, Marcus's phone buzzed. He looked down and quickly excused himself. "That's my friend. She's gonna meet us here in a bit. I'll help get the kitten to her." Lena was grateful more than she realized. Marcus had shown up unexpectedly, and in doing so had made everything seem manageable. She had never seen such calm, such selflessness in someone before, and now, more than just being grateful, she felt inspired. She had spent most of her life trying to manage everything alone, not realizing that sometimes it wasn't about doing it all yourself. It was about trusting others and sharing the load. As he turned to leave, Marcus paused and looked back at her, the kitten gently cradled in his arms. "You're doing great," he said with a smile. "Sometimes the hardest part is just showing up. You know, you've already done the hard part." And with that, Marcus disappeared into the rain, leaving Lena with a new perspective. She realized that in her pursuit of independence, she had often overlooked the value of relying on others, of letting others in, of accepting help when it was offered. It wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a testament to human connection, the same kind of connection that could save not just a kitten, but a person's spirit as well. As the days passed, Lena found herself thinking more and more about the man who had shown up out of nowhere, guiding her through the care of the kitten and offering words of quiet reassurance. Marcus, she wasn't sure what it was about him. Maybe it was his calmness in the midst of the storm or his genuine, unassuming kindness. But there was something about the way he had handled the situation that made her feel, well, something she hadn't felt in a long time, vulnerable. Vulnerability was a feeling Lena had avoided her whole life. Her pride had always been her armor. Raised to believe that the strongest people were the ones who handled everything on their own, she had spent most of her life building walls around herself. Friends had come and gone, relationships had withered, and she had allowed all of it to happen because she was determined not to need anyone. She could make it through anything, she told herself. She didn't need help, and she definitely didn't need anyone else's pity or charity. But after the encounter with Marcus, something was shifting inside her. The kitten was still with her, recovering slowly, and Lena had made an appointment with Marcus's friend at the local animal rescue. The kitten was in better shape now, its fur starting to dry and fluff up, and Lena had started to let herself care for it. But there was something nagging her, something that felt unfamiliar. One evening, Lena was sitting in her apartment, the kitten curled up beside her on the couch, when the doorbell rang. She wasn't expecting anyone, so she hesitated before opening the door. When she did, she found Marcus standing there, soaked from the rain, a warm smile on his face. "I was in the neighborhood," he said, shrugging off the wet jacket. "I thought I'd stop by and see how the kitten is doing." Lena stepped aside, motioning for him to come in. "It's doing much better," she said, trying to sound more casual than she felt. "Thanks for checking in." Marcus took a look at the kitten, now purring softly, nestled comfortably on the couch. "Looks like it's in good hands. You're doing great with it." Lena smiled, but the compliment felt different from how she had imagined. The words seemed too simple, too easy. She had expected to feel proud, but instead, she felt exposed. Vulnerable, even. She sat down on the couch, the silence between them stretching for a few moments before Marcus spoke again. "You know, you're not just taking care of this kitten," he said, his voice gentle, almost like he was testing the waters. "You're taking care of yourself too. I can see it." Lena blinked, her stomach tightening at his words. "What do you mean?" "I mean," he said, sitting down beside her, "you've been through a lot, I can tell. But you're giving yourself something that's important, something you didn't think you needed before. You're letting this kitten in, letting someone else in." Lena's chest tightened as the words sank in. She stood up quickly, needing some space, needing to distance herself from this feeling she couldn't control. She wasn't ready for this. She wasn't ready to admit that Marcus might be right. That maybe, just maybe, she had been closing herself off for so long that she didn't know how to truly connect with anyone. Not even herself. "Look," Lena said, forcing her voice to stay steady, "I appreciate what you've done, but I'm fine. I can handle this. I always have." Marcus stood up as well, his gaze steady but not judgmental. "Lena, I'm not saying you're not strong. You are. But there's a difference between being strong and being alone. And I think you've spent so much of your life trying to be the strong one that you forgot what it's like to let people in, to let yourself be helped, to be seen." His words felt like a punch to the gut. Lena took a step back, feeling exposed, raw. She hadn't realized how much she had been hiding from the world until now. She hadn't realized how much she had been hiding from herself. "Maybe I don't want to be seen," she said quietly, her voice shaking. "Maybe if I let people see me, they'll see how messed up I am, how broken I really am." There it was, the truth she had never allowed herself to say out loud. She had spent so much time building walls around her that she had forgotten what it was like to let people close. She had convinced herself that being alone was safer, that needing anyone meant she was weak. Marcus stepped forward, his presence steady, but not forceful. He didn't push. He simply placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "Lena," he said softly, "we all have our broken parts. And sometimes, it's the broken parts that make us who we are. But you don't have to carry it all alone. You're not alone, not anymore." Lena stood there for a moment, his words hanging in the air between them. She wanted to pull away, to retreat into the safety of her old ways. But something in his voice, something in the simplicity of his care, kept her rooted to the spot. The storm outside had intensified, but inside, Lena felt a shift. She was still scared, still unsure of what it meant to truly open up to someone, to accept help, to let herself be vulnerable. But for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to acknowledge that maybe, just maybe, it was okay to need someone. To trust that kindness, when offered without expectation, wasn't a weakness but a strength. "I don't know if I can do this," Lena whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Marcus smiled gently, his hand still on her shoulder. "You don't have to do it all at once. Just take it one step at a time. We'll get there." For the first time, Lena didn't feel like she had to do it alone. And for the first time, she realized that the strength she had been searching for wasn't found in keeping everyone at a distance, but in allowing herself to be seen. Flaws, pain, and all. As the rain poured down outside, Lena allowed herself to be vulnerable, to let Marcus's kindness wash over her like the storm outside. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop hiding. The next few days passed in a blur for Lena. Marcus had left that night, but something about his words stayed with her. They lingered in the corners of her mind, challenging the foundation she had built her life upon. For years, Lena had believed that self-sufficiency was the ultimate form of strength. She had worked so hard to prove to herself and to others that she could handle anything on her own. But Marcus had shown her a different kind of strength, a quiet, patient strength that came from allowing others in, from sharing the weight instead of carrying it alone. At first, she resisted the idea. It was uncomfortable, to say the least, letting someone into her world, letting them see the parts of her that she kept hidden, the parts she was ashamed of, was terrifying. But as the days went by, she couldn't deny that something was shifting. She started to feel lighter, more at ease, as if the walls she had built were slowly coming down. She had taken the first step by letting Marcus help her with the kitten, and now she found herself questioning the walls she had built around her entire life. One evening, after a long day at work, Lena found herself sitting in the same spot on her couch, the kitten resting peacefully beside her. She had fed it, bathed it, and watched it grow stronger each day, but something in her heart had grown as well. She hadn't realized it at first, but as she stroked the kitten's soft fur, she realized that she was no longer just taking care of it for the sake of doing something right. She was doing it because she cared, because she was learning how to care again. Her phone buzzed, and she saw a text from Marcus. "How's the kitten doing?" Lena smiled, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. She didn't want to just give him an update. She felt like there was something more she needed to say, something she hadn't told him yet. Slowly, she typed out a message. "I think I'm doing better than I thought. The kitten's doing great, but I think I'm learning to be a little more open, too. Thank you for showing me that." She paused, staring at the message for a moment, unsure if it was enough. But then she pressed send. Felt like the right thing to do. A few minutes later, Marcus responded. "I'm glad to hear it. And don't thank me. You're doing the work, you're just letting yourself be a little more human." Lena laughed softly at his words. It wasn't just the kitten that was healing, it was her, too. She had been so closed off, so afraid to connect with anyone, afraid to admit that she wasn't always okay, that she wasn't always in control. But now, she was realizing that there was power in vulnerability, power in allowing others to see her flaws. She didn't need to be perfect. She just needed to be real. The next weekend, Lena decided to take a walk through the park. She had been cooped up in her apartment for so long, and now, with the kitten thriving and her heart feeling a little lighter, she wanted to do something for herself. As she walked, she found herself thinking about Marcus and the quiet way he had helped her rediscover something she thought she had lost. She hadn't expected it, but he had shown her the true power of human connection. She was so lost in thought that she almost didn't notice the small crowd gathered near the entrance to the park. There were people standing around, talking in hushed voices, and in the center of it all, there was a table with signs that read, "Adopt, don't shop." A local animal rescue was there, trying to find homes for abandoned animals. Lena felt a sudden rush of inspiration. She had been thinking about how much she had changed, how much she had grown, and how she had learned to care not just for herself but for others as well. It wasn't just about the kitten. It was about everything she had learned over the past few weeks, about the strength that came from letting others in, from sharing the load, from helping those in need. Without thinking, Lena walked over to the table. She spoke to the woman running the adoption event and, after a brief conversation, she signed up to volunteer. It felt like the natural next step for her, the right way to give back. She wasn't just going to help one kitten. She was going to help others. She was going to use the lessons she had learned, the kindness she had received, to make a difference in someone else's life. It was her way of paying forward the compassion Marcus had shown her. Over the next few months, Lena spent her weekends volunteering at the shelter. She helped with adoptions, cleaned kennels, and spent time with the animals. She found herself connecting with people in ways she hadn't before, sharing stories, laughing, and feeling a sense of belonging that she had never known. The more she gave, the more she received. Her heart opened in ways she couldn't have predicted. One evening, after a particularly long day at the shelter, Lena was sitting on the couch at home when she received another message from Marcus. "How's the volunteering going?" Lena smiled as she typed back, "It's going great. I've been helping out a lot lately, and I think I'm starting to understand what it really means to give back." A few minutes passed before Marcus replied, "I knew you'd get there. You're not just helping animals, you're helping yourself too." Lena paused, reading his message over and over. She had started this journey unsure of herself, unsure of what it meant to be vulnerable, to trust, to open her heart. But now she knew. She wasn't just healing the kitten. She was healing herself. And in giving back, she had found a part of herself she hadn't known was missing, her ability to connect, to care, and to give. In that moment, Lena understood that the true value of Marcus's actions wasn't just in his kindness to a kitten. It was in the way he had helped her rediscover the importance of human connection. He had given her the courage to change, to embrace vulnerability, and to open her heart to others. It was a lesson she would carry with her for the rest of her life. And as Lena looked down at the kitten curled up beside her, she realized that sometimes the smallest, most unexpected encounters could change everything. The world wasn't just about what we take. It was about what we give and the connections we make along the way. As Lena sat on the couch, the kitten now peacefully dozing in her lap, she reflected on how much her life had changed in such a short time. The small, helpless creature that had once been shivering in the rain had led her to something even more profound than she could have imagined. It had been the catalyst for her transformation. A transformation that began with the willingness to accept help and the courage to open herself up to others. She thought back to that rainy night when Marcus had shown up out of nowhere, offering not just his knowledge but his presence. He had made her feel seen in a way she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. At first, it had been uncomfortable. The walls she had so carefully built around herself were beginning to crack, and that terrified her. But as time passed, she realized those walls weren't just protecting her. They were isolating her from the beauty of human connection. Lena looked at the kitten, now healthy and thriving, and smiled. It wasn't just the kitten that had been saved. It was her, too. In the process of caring for something else, she had learned to care for herself again. She had learned that kindness wasn't a weakness and that asking for help didn't diminish her strength. In fact, it made her stronger. Her phone buzzed, and she saw a message from Marcus. "How's the kitten doing?" She smiled, typing her response. "She's doing great, and so am I. Thank you for everything you've taught me. I didn't even know I needed to learn it." A moment passed before Marcus replied, "You always knew, Lena. You just needed to see it for yourself." Lena set the phone down and sat back, a deep sense of peace settling over her. She had spent so much of her life trying to be everything on her own, but now she understood that real strength came from allowing herself to be vulnerable, to give and receive love, and to trust in the connections that made us human. In that quiet moment, Lena realized that sometimes the most unexpected encounters, the ones that challenge our beliefs and make us step out of our comfort zones, are the ones that lead us to the greatest growth. And in learning to open her heart to the world, she had found the greatest gift of all, connection. And with that, she knew she was ready for whatever came next, because she no longer had to face it alone.